Suchita Bhhatia ma'am is a filmmaker, podcaster and a mental health advocate. Suchita ma'am has directed numerous corporate and a commercial and a brand films also featuring talents like Anushka Sharma, Manoj Vajpayee, Priyanka Chopra and the list goes on. She does two amazing podcasts, both running in 100 plus episode, The Artist, The Culture and The Cinema, which has been amazing guest, the academic nominated of the Cultural Sharper. The podcast has been featured on Apple and a Tinker's 360. Give a round of applause for her.
Now I request Krishna from YathaKatha team to join the conversation.
Thank you so much for coming, ma'am. It's my pleasure to be here sitting next to you because a lot of Gen Z questions that I want to ask behalf of all the Gen Z here, who are watching you live. Before we start off with a lot of formal questions, I want to know what pushed you for podcast and what is the background why did you choose podcast? What is your background?
So podcast for me was actually something on the side because I'm a filmmaker by profession. Podcast just happened to me in 2019, and one of the reasons it happened to me was because I used to listen to a lot of Tim Ferriss podcasts. So I don't know if any of you guys know who is Tim Ferriss. You can Google and check, one of the best podcasters we have around. And I wanted to do something, I was not sure what it was. But at that point around 2019, there was a lot of questions that I had. I had made my first feature-length film, and I was having a lot of questions around how to take the film forward, and nobody else had the answers. This is when I started with the Artist podcast, which was primarily for independent filmmakers. But now it has become it's become much more wider in its scope. So that was to answer the why and how to move forward after you make your film, and how to take it to the right audience. So that's how it started. I started doing it on my own, but now we've got partners who have joined in. So yes.
Okay. When it comes to podcast, we've heard a lot of radio, and how is it different? And I want you to please explain us the concept of podcast versus radio.
Yeah, so podcast and radio are two very different things, two very different mediums also, I would say. Almost like a TV broadcast versus, say, a YouTube channel, a personal YouTube channel. So radio is something that becomes you have to listen at a specific time. It is broadcasted by bigger networks. But when it comes to podcasts, you have the liberty. Any of you can become podcasters. You just need a good space, a silent space, a microphone. And if you have a voice, and if you have an opinion, if you have something to say, any of you can become a podcaster. And you can create your own audience in terms of, you can build your audience who would like to listen to the topic that you are talking about. So if you like talking about beauty, if you like talking about films, if you like talking about, like I have my other podcast, which is mental health, if there are things that touch you, and if there are things that you feel that you have a unique take on it, and you need to take it out there into the world, it's a very liberating and democratic medium, which radio is not, because radio is out there to, they program it, they want certain programs, just like a television channel does. But in a podcast, it can be like a YouTube channel. You can start your own anytime, and you can build your audience.
Okay. You just told that radios are scheduled. There is a concept of structured and an unstructured podcast, and I believe that unstructured podcasts are very raw. And there are sometimes, like you said, you have a mental health concept that is in your podcast. How do you deal with mental health and the rawness? And sometimes I've heard so many podcasts where the speakers break down while talking, and there are a lot of times when it gets to a very personal level. And how do you deal with such rawness and, like, when it comes to mental breakdowns while you're talking?
See, that, like you rightly pointed out, there are different kinds of podcasts. Like, it comes in a fiction space, like telling stories, like true crime podcasts, like whatever, you like. And there is also the non-fiction space, is the unscripted space of podcasting, which I do. Like Krishna asked me in terms of how do you deal when it comes to mental health if somebody breaks down. So mental health is something that's close to me, in the sense that I have seen, I understand the ecosystem, I've seen it in my environment, people living and dealing with depression and bipolar. So I have also had a one-to-one conversations with them in terms of why it's important to take therapy. So because I've dealt with them in real life, it's easier for me to handle them in a podcast while I'm talking to them. And it makes you more empathetic in terms of understanding human behavior, and also how to sort of handle things and situations.
Okay. Um the podcast culture is in trend right now, and is there something that you want to tell the Gen Z about podcasts, because everyone is so fascinated about podcasts today? Is there something or any main elements that have to be in a podcast? What are they?
See, podcast is a very it's not like movie, 100-year-old medium. It's a fairly new medium. Things that we are exploring and things that we are learning on the way while doing podcast. A lot of things are getting discovered. We don't even have a TAM like we have in channel where you can measure things. Nothing has been invented or innovated so far. So it's something that we have an opportunity to learn while we go. So what if you are interested in doing a podcast, what you can actually do is, you can get hold of a good microphone which is professional. You can build a space for yourself, either have a studio space or have a space in your house that is absolutely silent, and build your recording space there. And once you've identified what is the kind of podcast that you want to do, and you start putting it out there into the network, and when you start building your audience in the process, that's when you're going to learn the pros and the cons, and also how you relate to this medium in terms of storytelling, in whichever way you're approaching it. So there are no hard and fast rule. The only rule is that you need to know that why do you want to do a podcast? What is your topic of discussion that you can go on for 100 episodes or 200 episodes and not get tired? Can you be consistent enough to release episodes every week, or whatever you plan, bi-monthly, twice a month, thrice a month? And make sure that you have some partners who can help you with marketing the podcast once. And of course, you need to get your sound quality good while you're recording the podcast. So a couple of things which you have to be careful of.
And where do you see podcasts in the future? As a medium of communication, as a medium of expression? For you, is podcast a way of self-expressing or giving it to the audience?
Yeah, that would come under your why. That what is the kind of impact that you want to create? What is it that you really want to do? Like with my mental health podcast, the SOS show, the impact that we wanted to create when we started in 2019 was to create more awareness about mental health and to remove the stigma around it, and to say that anybody can have any mental health issues at any point in their life. It is not related to specific people as how the society has understood so far. So so far, with 100 plus episodes of our mental health podcast, we have managed to reach and touch a lot of lives, including lived experiences which people have managed to share with us. It has also spurred a lot of other mental health podcasts which had not started around that time. People are more open to sharing their stories, and people are more open to going out there and taking help. Now even celebs have started talking about it. Deepika is talking about it. Amir Khan is talking about it. So all this has happened over now in the last 2 years, 3 years. Pandemic and post, it was not there before. That's because small drops came together and said, okay, now we are going to start talk about it and remove the stigma. So that so even though you might feel as a podcaster, you might feel, okay, I have a niche audience, I have a certain audience that's listening to my podcast because I'm talking about mental health, but you do not know who is involved in that niche and how will that sort of have a butterfly effect which can go to a larger and create a change or create a transformation. So that's what the mental health podcast did. And also the other podcast, The Artist, which is on filmmaking, on arts and on culture, which has a wider canvas now. We talk about varied things, so we have been able to sustain like 100 plus episodes so far, looking at people or trying to invite people who are doing things and adding value to the culture scape of the world. So yeah.
Okay, you've talked about celebs now. All of us is just fascinated to know, since you've podcasted with a lot of celebs, there are a few topics that come just in the moment, that just comes out like an unstructured podcast, just comes. How do you deal when they're uncomfortable with something they want to share? Like, not just celebs, be it anyone that you're talking to, when it just comes out, how do you deal with celebs that are not very comfortable of something that you're talking, but it's just going on? How do you deal with it?
So, see, when we are talking about celebs, we have to be very careful in terms of when we are talking to them. I always make sure to make my guests comfortable, whether they're celebs or whether they're people who have contributed immensely in the space I'm talking about. So I always mention as a host that it will happen in a flow, but at any point, if you are not comfortable disclosing certain things, we can always edit that out. So because a podcast is something, it's not live, you can edit and you can change it, and we have done it because few of them have not been comfortable talking about certain things. So yeah, you always make sure, because as a guest, it is our duty to make sure that the guests are comfortable in whatever way possible, talking about how much ever they can.
Okay. What are few concepts or topics that are really trending in podcast culture and that will flourish even in the future?
See, trends are very difficult to predict, but right now it's comedy is really something that people like to hear. Also, people like to hear true crime stories. It's something that is trending a lot. But as more podcasters are going to come, as is being predicted in the next 5-7 years, also there's going to be a lot of regional podcasting, which is besides your English, your Hindi, a lot of small, maybe states or small towns we haven't even heard of. It is being predicted that a lot of podcasters are going to come from there as well. So I feel that right now we are saying that okay, this is the genre that people are listening to a lot, like a true crime, but we do not know. It's like a YouTube channel. You do not know who's building their audience and in whichever way, and suddenly it's like that content or that piece of conversation or storytelling is being really liked. So very difficult, but yeah.
Okay, now that you've mentioned that there are a lot of states that do not, how do you reach the audience that needs to hear what you're saying? And there are, for example, about mental health, how do you reach the rural audience, or like women or men, be it men? There are, some sensitive topics like abuse, sexual abuse, or any of that sort that people don't pop up with, like they can't talk about it, and there are rural women that have to be educated about all such things. How do you reach that audience with your podcasts?
See, podcasts have not reached that far right now. We are still talking about, we are still saying that okay, we have got million plus listeners in India, but those million plus is still 12% of people in India who listen to podcasts. So that's a very small amount, which is why the opportunity is huge in this medium, which is why you can see in the next 5 years, 6 years, 7 years, if any of you guys plan to take podcasting as a profession, you can see that it's not a cluttered medium like perhaps films in a certain way, because there's a huge amount of opportunity to explore. We are talking about metros right now where it's penetrated. It's not even reached A and B small. It's not even reached B town. Smaller towns which are like Meerut. Even thoda bahar jayenge to people have started listening to it, but it's not a very popular medium as yet. It's still very, very metro centric. So reaching, like Krishna asked me, reaching mental health in a small town, or even it's something very distant right now. Even a Jaipur kind of a place, the listeners are too little. 12% of India is listening to it, so you can still figure out where all it is. So penetration is very limited, which is where there is opportunity.
So, as a civilized citizen, how can we contribute to that? To reach to people through podcasts. How do we help them?
So reach people through podcasts. So uh, uh, if you're asking me how do we reach people through the podcast, then of course you need to first decide what is your topic of podcasting, what is it that you want to say. And once you start podcasting, one of the key things that you need to pay attention to is that, okay, identify your bandwidth in terms of, okay, I'm reaching the metros right now. So how do you market it? What are the people that you're going to tie up with? Who are your collaborators? Like in mental health, we've got collaborators that we tie up with in terms of reaching the audiences. So your collabs and your tie-ups is going to define you ultimately in terms of how much. But again, you must understand that it's a slow medium, so it's not going to be an overnight. Suddenly you're not going to be even a Ranveer Allahabadia. He's not even a podcaster. He's actually a YouTuber who has been YouTubing for the last 10 years. And his YouTube audience has become his podcast audience. It is not a podcasting that he has started. So it's a slow medium. It's a medium that you need to be consistent, and you need to think long term and not think that tomorrow I'm going to get up and become a Joe Rogan. Because even a Joe Rogan has been doing it for the last 15 years, I believe. And Tim Ferriss, again, 15, 16 years. So it's a long-term thinking, and definitely not a short-term thinking, because you'll not get results if you're looking for, another 2 years, I'm going to be a phenomenon. That's not going to happen.
Okay. Since you mentioned that you were a filmmaker, you still are
I am.
a filmmaker. Most of us are aspiring filmmakers here. Behind in every film, there is a call for the cause, like in making of a film. Does that concept apply to podcast as well? Is there a call for you to make a podcast?
Yeah, absolutely. There should be a call for everything, because then why would you do anything? Because we are given a limited time, right? We have a limited life, if I can just say. So you should only put your time and effort into something that is your calling. Whether it's your podcast or whether it's telling a story through visual medium, you should never put your time and effort in anything that is something being told to you by someone to do it. Always find your calling and do it, whatever way.
That was great. One last question from my side before we move on to the audience. Actually, two. What kind of research goes behind a podcast?
That's a very good question. A lot of research goes behind a podcast in terms of every episode that you are planning to do. I can only talk about non-fiction because that's what I do. When I am identifying my guest, who is my guest, and why should this guest be on the podcast, and what is it that this guest is going to bring to the table that no other guest has brought to the table. So one of the key criterias when you are doing your episode is that you're identifying your guest, and that guest has to be very special. And after that, you need to identify the kind of questions that you're going to ask the guest. Your questions are literally like ChatGPT. The prompts have to be right. So when your prompts are right is when you're going to get the right answers from your guests, the answers which are going to be unique. So you become a ChatGPT there, prompting the guest to give you the right answer. So it takes a lot of time in terms of the research work, for both my podcasts, the artist and the mental health especially also takes a lot of time, because it at times becomes very technical in terms of if we are talking about something serious. But if you're talking about lived experiences, then it becomes like a storytelling where you're trying to, get things out of the guests, because getting things out of the guest is not easy when it comes to asking somebody to tell their own story and be absolutely free about it. And when we are talking about mental health, it's very difficult when somebody is talking about their depression issues, or if they're talking about their whatever other things that they are facing, anxiety or stress, even the little things of everyday living that we are doing. Little things can come together to become something big, something that we do not even know. Like sitting right now, I could be very stressed, but how is that impacting my mental health? I would not know. Maybe I'll know that in the next 5 years. So you need to be very, very careful about these little things when we are talking to the guests.
Okay. Why do you think is there a significant raise in the concept of podcasts, and what do you have to say to all the future podcasts who want to make podcasts or, as a career? What do you have to say to them?
Absolutely, it's a medium. It's got huge opportunity because it's not been. It's a very raw medium right now. Like I said, we do not even know the basics of it. A lot of things are getting innovated in the process of the podcast. So the opportunity is huge. There's a lot that will happen. That will get discovered with say regional podcasters coming in the space. And if you are serious about it, you can definitely make a huge, very good career out of podcasting. And if you start thinking now about it, you will be able to you might become a podcaster, you might have your own studio in the next 5-6 years. You might support other podcasters to make their podcasts. So it's huge. It's like having your own voice and putting your voice out there into the world, and hoping that it will create some kind of impact and might transform a few lives. You never know. So yes.
Okay, that was very insightful, and I love how you talked about mental health, because I am studying psychology as well.
Wow.
So psychology and filmmaking, that was great. Okay, now let's move on to the questions from the audience. We'd like to take some questions.
Thank you so much, ma'am. First of all, I wanted to say your smile is very warm.
Thank you.
Okay, the question I had is, how do we make money out of podcasting? That's the most practical question.
Yeah. So, see, monetization in podcasting right now is in a very nascent stage. So, monetization can happen through brand collaborations. It can happen through, somebody, if you're consistently having a celeb, then the celeb brand can come on your podcast. You can have your advertising running through tie-ups with like a Google or a Yahoo. But all these things are again in a very trial and tested mode. If you're saying that, okay, you go to your office and you work for 1 month and you're going to get a paycheck of 1 lakh, that's not going to happen in podcasting. Podcasting is something that you have to consistently do and see. So it's not something that will give you an immediate result, but if you're able to build something out of it, like you're able to build a studio, you're able to build a brand, then you have a potential to be able to think about a very good amount of money, maybe after being there for 6, 7, 8 years.
Okay, thank you, ma'am.
Ma'am, you have done 118 episodes on SOS, and your first episode was on schizophrenia, and your latest one was like caring for the mental caregivers.
Yeah.
And you have often have new guests every time you release a podcast. So do you have a conversation with them before the podcast, or do you just go in straight?
Yeah, that's a very good question. I actually ask my guests that do they want to know the questions or the pointers, or are they okay with going with the flow? When I'm talking about something very personal, when somebody is telling their own story, I do not want to discuss the pointers, because I like to keep it in a flow and see how much I can take it out from the guests and make them comfortable. But when I'm talking to, say, somebody who is working in the mental health field, or somebody who's talking about meditation in a very unique way, then I understand and analyze how they are thinking, and I throw the pointers at them before the episode, a day before the episode.
And I had another question. So you have like gone through a lot of topics. Like one of your episodes was about like a 4-hour work week.
Yes.
And
That's Tim Ferriss again, yeah.
yes.
Yeah.
So how do you think you have evolved from like the mental, the schizophrenia and like the bipolar issues to the current, as a conversationalist and as like a person who works in a mental health, as a mental health advocate?
See, I didn't want to restrict it to talking about serious issues only, because I wanted to make people aware that mental health is not something serious that happens to certain people. It is our day-to-day journey. So I wanted to talk about mental well-being as well, our everyday living and everyday fighting with life can also lead to a lot of stress, and it can be something that we need to pay attention to. And all of us are prone to having gone through stress or something, even a fight, a normal fight with a friend or a parent can lead to stress. So I wanted to touch upon everything that can cause if our everyday well-being can get hampered by it. So that also includes, say, a mother-child or father-child relationship. So a lot of things are there in these 118 episodes, which is again becomes challenging, because if you've covered everything, then what are the things that you have not covered so far? So we've also, in the next episode, which is not released yet, we're talking about sleep and mental health, and why sleep is important and why we do not pay attention to it, So yeah, so those, everything possible in the gamut.
Yeah, so the college students would love that.
Yeah.
You might be passionate about a topic and a theme, you can be a good speaker, but how do you develop that engagement with your target audience, and what drives you to get those celebrities or the influencers to be collaborating with you and coming on? So how is that journey made possible for a person who's going to just start into podcasting, and what are the production costs or the investment costs that a person has to put aside for that 6 to 7 years to make it happen, the studio? So there is a journey, right? It is a content industry at the end of the day. So what does it take to build it up? And for all the youngsters who are aspiring to venture into this, how should they do it? Is it a parallel career, or is it all in and just you do that?
Yeah, that's very important. A very important question in terms of. So yeah, the first part I'll answer in terms of the celeb part. The celeb part will not happen immediately. It is something when you keep on doing it. Say you'll have to touch your at least 70, 80, 90 episodes before you actually can invite a big celeb into the podcast. So the same way it happened, like I can talk about my artist podcast, where I actually started getting the names. But because this podcast I started in 2019, and 2019 was still something where we did not know about a word called podcasting. So when I started doing, I was literally like almost like your first person inside the room. So at that point, when I called people and I said, okay, I'm doing a podcast, and I had to explain what a podcast is, I used to say it like Tim Ferriss, so at that point I used to enter in that spacing like Tim Ferriss, and I used to be like, okay, I got a few known names, and when that happened, few other known names also said yes. So you can enter in a way like that. Okay, I'm doing it like the first person basis. But yes, you will have to do your 50, 60 episodes. You need to be seen at least in your circuit of people to be able to invite the guests that you want. Otherwise, it is very difficult to like I've got Academy nominated filmmakers. I've got BAFTA winners. So I also approached people outside India who were who heard my podcast and said, okay, we like it and we will be able to do your podcast. So I was able to tap more celebs outside India than I was able to. I didn't actually try tapping many Indian celebs, but I managed to sort of get as I was tapping people from outside. So that was one of the way to do it. But yeah, you have to be consistent and be seen to be able to invite the names. In terms of the monies, yeah, that's a huge challenge. Because I'm a filmmaker, I was able to sort of support it in the sense that, I knew the studios and I was balancing it out. But if you are just going to start out on your own and say, okay, tomorrow I'm going to like leave everything and focus on my podcasting business, I would not suggest, do not do that, because that's not going to work. You will have to have know how much money it will go, because a certain amount of money will go. You will need to you'll either build a studio. Even if you build a studio in a corner of your house and you save your studio cost, you will still need to put in the money for your editing. You will need to put your money for your sound design. You will need to put in the money for your, to get your sound right. So either you have a collab with somebody, a friend who is running a studio and already can do that for you, and you can compensate like a barter and give the name, announce it, or you sort of pay the person. So that will also need a certain amount of money. So you can do it in a barter way, or you can do it in. But I think you will definitely, since you guys are in college, you will definitely find people who can help you out in terms of your friends who are working in sound or friends who are working, and you can come together to create a podcast and say, okay, let's do it, and all of us are going to learn in the process. So yeah.
Okay, like I said, we can go on and on listening to a podcast and asking questions. I'd like to end it with you keep taking Tim Sir's name. Is there any story behind or an inspiration? So we'll end this on an inspirational note, and one motive that you strongly believe in. We'd like to end it on that note.
Tim Ferriss, no? Because there's an immense amount of the kind of questions that, because I have the same structure in my podcast, the kind of question that Tim Ferriss asks is a very profound and a very deep questions, and he tries and dig so much out of the guests that there's nothing left that you do not know about that specific topic in that episode, because it's so well done in terms of the prompts are absolutely brilliant, and which is what I love, because it is, as they say, it is not the answers, it is the questions that you ask in life that are important. So what are the kind of questions that you're asking in life is something that I actually learned from Tim Ferriss, how to ask deep and profound questions which will enlighten you and push you forward in your thinking process, because it is also, at the end of the day, how you're thinking is going to define your life. So that's how I also see Amir as an actor. He's a thinking actor, because the way he thinks is actually makes him an actor, the kind of actor that he is. So yeah, your thinking process is important.